Her house sat at the edge of town, wrapped in a silence that was never empty. To most, it looked like a place forgotten by time, its wooden fence leaning with age, its windows always half closed against the afternoon sun. But for her, every corner of that little home carried its own music. The creak of the floorboards, the rustle of wind in the ivy, the rhythm of rain tapping on the roof. These were the paintings that filled her walls. She had been blind for more than 3 decades, long enough that her memories of color had faded like distant dreams. Yet whenever someone visited, she spoke of beauty as if she could see it still. People were puzzled, even unsettled. How could a blind woman always talk about sunsets, about flowers blooming, about the sparkle in children's laughter? To them, it sounded like she was pretending, perhaps trying to comfort herself. But to her, it was the truth. In the mornings, she would sit in her garden, her hands brushing over the petals of roses and wild daisies. She did not see their colors, but she felt their softness and inhaled their scent. Letting the fragrance draw pictures in her mind, she called the red roses warm, like fire on a winter's night. She said the daisies felt like small stars scattered across her fingertips. Those who listened often smiled politely, but inside, many thought she was simply clinging to words she no longer understood. Still, she spoke with such conviction that sometimes, just for a moment, people believed her. Her voice had a calmness, as if she carried secrets that others overlooked. Yet beneath her calm exterior, there was a heaviness she rarely showed. When the evenings grew long and quiet, and no one came by, she sometimes wondered if her inner world of beauty was real or if she had only built it to survive the darkness. The silence of night was heavier than the silence of day. She could hear her own doubts whispering like distant echoes, but she never let those doubts reach her voice. To anyone who asked, she would always say she saw beauty everywhere, because in her heart she knew that beauty did not belong only to the eyes, it belonged to something deeper, something she could not explain but had always felt. And so, her days passed quietly, each one carrying the same ritual of listening, feeling, remembering, until one afternoon, when a young neighbor began knocking at her door, bringing with him questions she had not faced in years. The neighbor was young, restless, and full of the kind of doubt that comes from searching for meaning too soon. He was studying at the local college, unsure of his place in the world, and often wandered the neighborhood to escape his own thoughts. One day, curiosity drew him to her gate. He had heard stories, the blind woman who always spoke of beauty, and something about it unsettled him. He came often after that, bringing questions she did not expect. He asked her bluntly how she could speak of sunsets she no longer saw. He wanted to know how she could describe flowers as if they still bloomed in her vision. At first, she only smiled, inviting him inside to sit, letting his doubts fall into the quiet of her home. But his questions carried weight. They stirred something she had long kept hidden. She remembered the day her sight dimmed for the last time. The doctors had warned her it would happen, but warnings do not soften the blow of darkness. She had been 28 then, teaching children to play the piano, her fingers still alive with music even as her eyes betrayed her. The night she lost her vision entirely, she sat on her bed with her hands pressed against her face, feeling the terror of a life she thought had ended. She confessed this to him, her voice slow, steady, but heavy with memory. She told him that in those early days, she believed beauty had left her forever. She stopped touching the keys of her piano. She stopped going to the garden. She even stopped listening to the laughter outside her window. The world felt distant, unreachable, and her heart was filled with shadows no light could break. The neighbor listened, his usual restlessness subdued. For the first time, he saw not just the woman in front of him, but the long journey behind her words. Still, his doubt lingered. He asked her, if she had known such darkness, how could she now speak of beauty as if it surrounded her? She grew quiet, her fingers resting on the arm of her chair. Then she spoke of the small discoveries that saved her, the warmth of the sun on her skin, the way music touched her without needing her eyes, the laughter of children on the street that painted pictures she did not need to see to believe. Slowly, she had begun to notice that while she had lost her sight, her soul had opened wider. Her neighbor frowned, unconvinced. To him, beauty was in what could be seen, captured, admired. He could not understand how she called the unseen beautiful. His doubts pressed harder, and though she smiled at him, inside she felt the weight of defending something so fragile, something even she sometimes questioned in the silence of her nights. And yet, she welcomed his questions, because in them she felt a chance to show not only him, but herself once more, why she had chosen to keep believing. The next time he came, she was waiting for him. There was a steadiness in her posture, as though she had been preparing to share something she had long carried. She asked him to sit, and in the quiet of her small living room, she began to speak with a depth that hushed even his doubts. She told him that blindness had once felt like a wall that had cut her away from the world. But over time, she learned it was not a wall at all, it was a doorway. She had lost one kind of vision, but another had slowly awakened. She explained that beauty was not always something to be seen. It was something that lived in the way we feel, the way we connect, the way we allow our hearts to open. She described a morning when she sat in her garden after a storm. The air was heavy with the smell of rain, and the petals of the flowers were still wet. She let her fingers glide over them, feeling their softness, each drop of water like a pearl against her skin. She said she could sense the garden shining without ever seeing it. To her, that was beauty. Her words softened him, but he still asked, almost pleading, how she could compare this to the brilliance of colors, to the sight of a sunset blazing across the horizon. She smiled gently and said that a sunset was not only colors, it was warmth on the skin. It was silence slowly falling over the day. It was the faint cry of a bird returning home. She reminded him that even with his sight, he had often missed those things. To her, beauty was not less without sight, it was simply different, deeper, less fleeting. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, almost shyly, he asked if she ever wished she could see again. Her hands folded in her lap, and she admitted yes. Sometimes she longed for it, because she was human and memories of sight still lived in her. But she added softly that she no longer needed it to find joy. Losing her sight had given her a gift she never expected, the ability to teach others to see beyond their eyes. The young man lowered his head, his restlessness quieted. For the first time, he felt her words not as something strange, but as something true. When he left that evening, he paused at the door and described the sunset outside. He told her the sky was painted in fire and gold. She smiled, not because she could see it, but because he was learning to feel it as she did. And in that moment, both of them carried a light that reached beyond light, that asked anyone who heard their story to look deeper, to believe that beauty was never bound by what the eyes could hold. Sometimes the world teaches us that beauty belongs to what we see, but her story reminds us it is found in every corner of our being. Beauty lives in the warmth of kindness, in the sound of laughter, in the touch of rain against our hands. When we choose to notice, we carry light beyond sight. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs reminding of the beauty within life. And if you'd like more stories that guide you gently toward reflection, we welcome you to like, comment, and subscribe.